So if your body is willing to do that, you might start the meditation tonight with standing. Whether you're standing or sitting, notice that the earth is receiving you. And it's not only receiving you, but it won't let you go. None of us is flying off. So you might imagine the goodness of the earth, the energies of the earth, that goodness of receiving you, holding you, just moving up through your feet, through your knees, up through your legs into your torso. Into your upper chest and arms. And your neck and your head. Sort of like a tree. And if we go out into the woods, into the forest, there are all different kinds of trees. So we don't have to worry about what kind of tree we are. We don't have to worry if we're crooked, if we're a skinny tree or a fat tree, a light tree, a dark tree. None of it matters. The earth doesn't care. The sky doesn't care. We receive the goodness no matter what. So just like a tree in some of the winds, you might just see if your body wants to move a little bit. And see if you could listen to your body about this and not maybe decide so much, but just sort of listen. In fact, you may just find your body moving in a way that is interesting or surprises you. And then check in with your body and just see if it wants anything in particular. Sometimes our bodies want I want to scratch my neck here, and sometimes they want us to adjust a piece of clothing. It's uncomfortable. Just ask your body if it wants you to do anything in particular to give it a bit more ease. And when you're ready, you can sit if you want to. You remain standing if you'd like, whichever. I'm going to sit. And look to see if you're still a part of the earth and the sky. And if not, then just redo it. Redo that connection. It's something that's always available to us, no matter what else is going on. A way of organizing our bodies, checking in to see what's needed with our body, with our mind. And giving ourselves that. And speaking of the mind, as we begin the meditation, you might bring into your mind just a little piece of gladness that arose for you, maybe today. Doesn't have to be a big thing. Doesn't have to be the establishment of world peace. Could be just a moment of giggling at the cat. Or happy that the rain fell and we didn't have to water the flower bed today. And see if you might allow yourself to notice the quality of goodness that arises with that memory, with that recollection. The quality of goodness that arises somewhere in your body, just a little moment of happiness, gladness of heart. And again, no matter what else has happened today, you can allow yourself to breathe that in. And in Ajahn Suchito's words, linger in that gladness. I love that word, linger. Lingering in gladness. So we can linger in the goodness of an organized and nourished body, in a happy and gladdened heart and mind. And now for the rest of this meditation, I'll leave that up to you, how you want to proceed. You might want to just linger in goodness and gladness. Just keep noticing any qualities of goodness or wholesomeness in the body and the breath. Sometimes it just feels good to breathe. Or any qualities of gladness that arise in the body when you remember some sweet moment. Or maybe a sweet person, an encounter with someone. Someone smiled at you in the grocery store. Or maybe just the breath of resting awareness there. So make a choice, however you'd like to proceed, for these next moments in our meditation period tonight. And remember, whatever kind of tree you are tonight, whatever's going on in the body, whatever's going on in the mind, it doesn't matter. Simply know it, be aware, It's like that. This body, this mind, it's like this now. Greeting it with care and affection even. Just as we might greet those different trees and plants and bugs and birds out in the forest. And as you feel ready, I would invite you to allow your eyes, if they're closed, to open a little bit. And let in light. Notice that we are special kinds of trees we can see. And see how that is for the body and the mind. How is it to be just this, here in this room, in this space? As I said, tonight's offering, it was inspired by, in part by the anniversary of August 12th, and in part by a book that some of us who have been involved with the Clergy Collective wrote together. And all of us were inquiring into what does our spiritual practice have to say about how we respond to the events of August 12th. Also, I know you know that I've been doing a long series on happiness, and tonight's going to be the first in the series on the Brahma Viharas, and in particular on loving kindness. Only I'm going to start backwards in the teaching on loving kindness, on working with the very difficult. Hence, working with the events of August 12th. So I'd invite a little contemplation as we begin. This is from the Buddha's Metta Sutta. So just as you listen, see if any of the words resonate for you, and if so, let there be that gladness. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outward and unbounded. Freed from all hatred and ill will. And so notice any quality of goodness or gladness that arises in your being. And now again, I'd invite you to consider a person or a situation. You know, it might be related to the events of August 12th, might be related to the events of today, maybe in your family, your relationships, maybe even in this community and the world, that you find a bit difficult. perhaps even a little more than a bit difficult. I'm going to read the sutta again. As you contemplate this circumstance, this person, this being, this relationship, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none, through anger or ill will, wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. And so we could notice whether there's any difference in our experience if we consider those two kinds of situations. Sometimes for me it's a bit challenging. And it certainly was as we all considered the events of August 12th and how do we respond to the Unite the Right rally. The clergy collective was certainly deeply engaged in wondering what our responsibilities were. But I would propose, and I think we propose to one another, this is our work as spiritual practitioners, to kind of work with the edge of the difficult. How do we bring these qualities of mind and heart to every living tree, to every living squirrel in every living tree, to every living bug, to every little snake, to every being, to all the Unite the Right rally goers in every direction? How do we do that? And it's difficult. It's uncomfortable when we start inquiring into the difficult. You saw the other quote that I had at the heading of the description for tonight. It's something that someone shared with me years ago from Bilbo Baggins. He says, "We are plain, quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them." And we can, we kind of giggle at that because we can recognize that, can't we? That it's like, okay, this difficult situation, this difficult person, this person who's behaving badly, it would appear this Unite the Right, these torchbearers, whatever it is, I'm going to be late for dinner if I pause to deal with this. And it really is uncomfortable. It's difficult to inquire, how do we do this? It's not an unusual inquiry. Even the great teacher Ajahn Chah, as you've heard me say many times, had the same inquiry. He said that he could practice the Metta Sutta, he could practice loving kindness beautifully when he was off in the forest by himself. But he saw that he got cranky and grumpy when he tried to deal with actual people, which is why he decided to start a monastery. He decided it would be good practice both for himself and other people. Unless we can bring our spiritual practice somehow or other, and I'll talk a little bit later about somehow or other, but unless we can bring our spiritual practice into every moment of our lives, of our being. Somebody was talking to me the other day about a beautiful practice of someone, one of the Tibetan monastics, who did this incredibly beautiful process of dying, of staying with his practice every single moment as he was dying. And we all agreed that that's what we're called to every single day. Every moment is a practice of dying. It's like this now. And how do we be with that? Thich Nhat Hanh used to speak to a dilemma of, if you will, social action when the Vietnamese started bombing the villages, and the monastics had to decide, shall we just stay inside and meditate and pray, or should we go out? Should we do what should we do? How do we respond to this? And they contemplated and ended up deciding to do both. That somehow that weaving of that inquiry into real life was what was the beginning of what he called and taught about as, quote, engaged Buddhism. That practice that Thich Nhat Hanh taught is when we bring the practices, the insights, the qualities of heart and mind to the difficult, to what seems impossible. And so that's what we were called to on August 12th. And the challenge really is to bring those qualities as we are able. One of the problems I think that we bump into when we start thinking about, if you will, spiritual practice and social action or engaged Buddhism is that there's only one way it's supposed to look. You're supposed to be out, and you're supposed to be marching, and you're supposed to be in there, and that's there's not one way. There's not one tree in the forest. There are many different ways, which is why I wanted all these wonderful people to come and talk about all their ways of dealing with it. And we have Susan Kaufman, who will be first, and Anne-Marie Smith, and Cynthia Powers, and Tim Michel. All people who have been long involved with IMCC and who were part of that inquiry through the Clergy Collective during that time. Now, they are not the only people who were engaged on that day. Anybody else who was there that day? Yeah. And all of you were, doing various things. I know Julie was down in the bowels of the Methodist Church helping people who were traumatized. So, it isn't like, we are the only people who did anything that day, but it just gives us an opportunity to inquire a little bit. As we all had to inquire that day, how do we, as privileged, most of us white people, how do we respond to the suffering of others? How do we respond to isms? How do we respond when people around us are deeply suffering? And whether it's the suffering of being the recipient of one of the isms, or whether it's the suffering of ignorance in perpetuating that suffering, how do we respond when people are suffering? So we all had that kind of inquiry. What is ours to do? And so each of us wanted to share our experiences with you. So I'm going to let them speak for themselves about how, what they ended up deciding to do. And we'll start with Susan.
Hello.
And actually, hold on one second. Please notice as you listen how different each of them is. Again, really underlining that there's not one way to respond to the suffering of others. Here you go.
Thank you. Am I close enough to the mic? Can you hear me? No. No, I'd rather. How about now? Okay. There were many different views among those of us in the Clergy Collective on what our response should be to the upcoming Unite the Right rally. And those of us from IMCC also chose different ways of engaging with the events of that summer. But we all brought our grounding in Buddhist teachings about discerning an appropriate response. The idea conveyed by this phrase is that it is for each of us, informed by our practice and accumulated wisdom, to discern our own actions. We are called to bring mindful attention to the question and respond rather than react, guided by the principle to refrain from harm and with the aim of reducing suffering for all beings. One dilemma with which we all grappled was whether we should show up at all on that day. The local police were urging people not to counter-protest, believing if the white supremacists were not given attention, they would lose steam and slink away. This contrasted with those who felt the need to stand up in opposition to racism, both to support communities of color and to encourage the white community to reckon with our country's racist history as embodied in the Confederate statues. In the end, we as a clergy collective did decide on some common efforts. There were twice daily prayers at the site of one of the statues all that week before August 12th, and interfaith prayer services each evening that week. At IMCC, our teachers addressed racism and social justice in their weekly talks and offered ways to use our Buddhist practice to inform our decisions about how to act. Our teacher, Susan Stone, was one of the leaders of an interfaith service that week. On August 12th, we were a part of a day of teachings offered at Common Ground, which was meant to be a safe space for contemplation, movement, and dialogue. At least one of our members was a part of the trauma team available at First United Methodist Church to provide emergency mental health services if needed, and they were. I decided that I wanted to be present on the streets during the demonstrations, but after taking part in nonviolent direct action training, I decided I was not ready to be a part of direct confrontation of the white supremacist demonstrators. I wanted, though, to find other ways to be present. I'd been a part of a KM group of IMCC members who came together in January of 2017, galvanized by the election of Donald Trump, to explore what the Buddhist teachings had to say about wise engagement. We began by taking a deep dive into Donald Rothberg's book, Engaged Spiritual Life. In anticipation of August 12th, our group decided that one of our appropriate responses was to offer a meditation in the park that Saturday morning to all who wanted to participate. Led by Julie Convisor, we held an early morning guided meditation in Court Square Park with readings from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Being Peace, in which he makes the connection between peace within ourselves and peace in the world. The scene when we arrived and settled into our seats was lively and friendly, but as the meditation continued, we began to hear loud shouting around the perimeter of the park as those arriving for the Unite the Right rally waved American and swastika flags and called out phrases like, "You will not replace us." The shouts were met with cries from the park, "Nazis go home," and "Get off our streets." My anxiety rose as voices, mostly male, grew louder and more hateful. But we meditators tried to keep our seats, to breathe, and to answer the call to be peace. It felt important to provide a peaceful presence within the chaos, to embody peace that would ground us as we moved out into the events unfolding in the streets.
So check into our own grounding. Make sure that you remember the tree has roots. The earth will not let you go. Thank you, Susan. Anne Marie Smith.
Thank you, Sharon. Can you all hear me? Okay. Thank you, Susan. The piece that I wrote for the book is entitled An Unlikely Activist, so this is some excerpts from that. At first glance, you would likely not peg me as a woman found protesting neo-Nazis in the street. Instead, you might think white, yoga pant wearing mother and probable Christian, although I noted today I don't really wear yoga pants that much anymore. The white yoga pant wearing part is accurate, but today I am a Western convert Buddhist. An essential element of my Buddhist practice is to drop such conditioned assumptions and seek greater clarity of any situation as it arises moment to moment. Sometimes people might imagine awakening in Buddhism as a moment of nirvana or bliss. This has not been my experience. Awakening is simply when the raw, unbiased truth of any given moment is seen. Awakening to difficult truths can be profoundly life-changing and has the potential to evoke a compassionate response. Prior to the events in 2017 in Charlottesville, the Jim Crow-era Confederate statues in our local parks were outside my field of awareness. That ended in February in 2017 when a young Black teenager wrote a letter describing how the statues made her feel. She felt unwelcome in her own hometown. A layer of oppression previously invisible to me was now impossible to unsee, and thus impossible to ignore. This uncomfortable awakening led to my direct involvement with August 12th, as well as many of the related events that occurred before and after that awful day. For me, being present on the streets on August 12th was a form of off-the-mat Buddhist practice. I felt called to be present with my body to the truth of that day. I purposefully and nonviolently put my body into the chaos as an alternative to hate. I did this along with many others, responding to various inner imperatives for racial justice. I and others did it for our neighbors who are not afforded the privileges of our skin tone. We stood with them so they did not stand alone. At one point early in the day, we linked our bodies together, attempting symbolically to block a group of white supremacists holding spiked shields and wearing helmets from entering Market Street Park. Armed simply with the dressings of our faith, religious garb, including collars and stoles and robes, we expected to be arrested. What unfolded was much worse. It was clear that law enforcement would not intervene. Members of Antifa stepped in. Frankly, without the intervention of Antifa, many clergy members would have been injured hours before the rally was set to begin. Much of the rest of the day was spent in the streets, intervening peacefully when able, bearing witness, and offering comfort, if only with our presence in what seemed to be an improbable, unruly war zone in the town that I called home. What was not so visible to people watching the melee in Charlottesville unfold on television and on the internet was the immense amount of thought, training, and preparation that went into the nonviolent faith-based response. However, no amount of training could have prepared us for the experience of being present in the streets that day. We did not anticipate seeing so many nail-studded shields, baseball bats, and militiamen armed with assault rifles, nor did we expect to hear so many hate-filled taunts from rage-filled red faces. It was a traumatic event. A lot of my own layers of conditioning and expectations were peeled away that day. My belief that institutions such as law enforcement would step in to protect oppressed people and those who stood with them was shredded. I realized I had stepped over a line, a dangerous line. Before that summer, I barely knew the line existed. Now I know it exists in my body. Eventually, after the collision that killed Heather Heyer, things quieted. My husband and my son picked me up. As we drove home, I distinctly remember stepping off the dangerous streets into the safety of our car. I knew that if we were pulled over by the police on the way home, we would be shielded by the color of our skin. I was acutely aware of the line of protection I stepped back over. I went home to my mostly white neighborhood and took a bath, trying impossibly to wash the hate from my body. I could take a Sabbath in a way that people of color cannot, because the color of my skin. I was awakened to a line of privilege I can choose to step over, back and forth. And because I can step over that line, I should, as a part of my Bodhisattva vow, to save all sentient beings. Once we see the truth of suffering, including the suffering that humans inflict on each other, we are called to respond compassionately, freeing ourselves from falsely constructed barriers. These barriers obstruct our view of each other's humanity.
Feel your feet on the floor. The earth has not stopped holding you. The sky has not stopped engulfing you. There's breath in the body. Let it be deep and nourishing. Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone is hatred healed. This is an ancient and eternal law. Thank you, Anne-Marie. We'll give you a chance to ask questions at the end. I'm sure you have some for folks. And Cynthia Power.
Thank you. Good evening. I can remember favoring racial equality as far back as elementary school, but I didn't have an activist proclivity. I also remember a subconscious acceptance of white privilege. I knew that racism was wrong and that it pervaded despite the best efforts of good people. I had no idea how to make change. So I tried to be the best person I could with my very white circle of friends and circumstances. I saw the Charlottesville Clergy Collective as a group of people of mixed race and diverse faith who could help me toward substantive work for racial equality. Becoming a part of the Charlottesville Clergy Collective was a struggle for me. As a shy introvert, I don't easily befriend strangers. In addition, my primary faith tradition, Quakers, sees all members as clergy, while the Protestant tradition in which I grew up sees clergy as special people called by God to head the church, requiring advanced education in order to do it right. I tended to approach the Charlottesville Clergy Collective in the light of my earlier understanding, feeling that perhaps I didn't qualify. While the members were kind and accepting, I wasn't sure that I was good enough. And yet I continued to attend those breakfast meetings. As a person with little activist experience among strangers, I determined that my mode would be to listen and learn. I admired those of the clergy collective who were clear about the correct action for them. Most actions that they suggested intimidated me, but I knew that I wanted racial haters to know that they weren't welcome in my town. So I contributed a case of bottled water and decided to show up at the event and participate to the degree I was comfortable. So on the morning of August 12, 2017, I found a parking space about 6 blocks from the Jefferson City School Center, a planned gathering location. As I walked to the Jefferson City School Center, I thought about the recent 2 months and my emerging relationship with racism in the town I'd called home for 20 years. And now I was headed to a rally to take a stance, feeling alternately frightened and excited. We walked in solidarity 4 blocks to the McGuffey Park for an event opposing the Unite the Right message. There were speakers from our city government and from faith communities in Charlottesville and beyond. People mingled, visited friends, and met new people. A rare few folks carried poles and other implements that looked like possible weapons. I listened to speakers, hung around for a while, and then I'd had enough. I had delivered my message to the haters, and it was time to go home. I didn't yet know the significance of August 11 and 12, 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, to our national or local history, or even its significance in my life. I continued to attend the monthly meetings of the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, and soon after the Unite the Right event, I became a member. With increasing comfort, I have become a more active participant. I've seen movement toward racial justice, personally, locally, and nationally. The Charlottesville Clergy Collective has provided compassionate support on all fronts.
Thank you, Cynthia. For me, I had long been scheduled to be in North Carolina on August 11th and 12th of that year. I was teaching a retreat, an Insight Dialogue retreat, as it happened. And I must confess that there was a part of me that was happy to get a pass. Even as I contemplated, what can I do? And then I met with my friend Tim at dinner one night.
So I don't have a written thing to read, but as I thought about tonight, I was reminded that we've all been reverberating with the trauma of what happened that day, even whether you weren't here, because it became a national event. And it's the first time I ever tasted hate was that day. But we had gotten a little bit of a hint of what was coming earlier that summer because there was a KKK protest. Some of you probably were there, and you could feel what was coming. It feels a little bit like the climate, frankly. It was building all that summer in the news, and people were worried and anxious, and there was a lot of shoulds. What should we do? What was our responsibility to do? What were we willing to do? And I wasn't at all sure about any of that. But then I ran into someone, and Sharon, and I was open, and she was open to what might we do. That I didn't want to grab a shield and march particularly, and although I admired all the things that people were doing, and I believed they were all correct, the people who did the prayers and visuals and all those things seemed totally correct to me, but not for me. So we got talking, and we basically went around and around and around. We were feeding on one another. It was so much fun. What could we do that might be positive, that might be helpful, that wouldn't just be taking a side? The older I get, the less interested I am in sides. And so we ended up coming up with an idea that sounds sort of silly, but we thought we could do a fundraiser, and it was based a little bit on something Sharon had found that had gone on in Germany, and I'd always had a bet every winter whenever there was, you could bet on the 1 inch of snow that was reported in the Daily Progress, and the prize was huge, usually a cup of coffee. But so we kind of had a matrix. So we created this idea that, well, we'll have a fundraiser, and we chose 4 charities here in town, causes that were great, and the whole idea was that if you could make a pledge based on the number of alt-right people that showed up that day. And you could pledge a penny, you could pledge $1,000. It didn't really matter to us. But we thought it was a brilliant idea. and it didn't exactly take off right away. We had to spend a lot of time trying to pull it together, and I would get discouraged, and she would pull me up, and she would get discouraged, and we were feeding on one another, and we did think it was a good idea. So the idea really was to take like an Aikido move and have the force of that coming. We knew it was coming. We didn't know what it was going to be. It was worse than I ever expected it to be, but we did know something was coming. So to take that negative energy and turn it to something positive, even if it was small, fundraiser. I mean, it seems sort of silly, but it was very important to me, and I was drawn to it, and I think Sharon was too, because it was open. It wasn't a closed thing. It was very open, it was positive, and it was about being helpful. So we didn't get too far at first, and there were some insurmountable things, but she found an internet wizard who was able to set up a site for us that you could go to, and we started talking to our friends about it. And I knew we were onto something, because when I talked to people about it, they started to smile. And people were scared. I mean, people were nervous. And to have people kind of go, oh, that's interesting. You could feel them relax about it, and they were nervous about it. We tried to give this idea away to the Clergy Collective and to IMCC and to various groups, and the organizations were big, and to them, I think it seemed sort of silly and not serious enough, and we knew it was a serious event, but we still believed in it, and Sharon basically said, well, I guess we'll have to do it. So we decided to do it, and we did get this up online, and this is a little shout out for NPR, but NPR put us up there and let us talk. I'm blanking on the woman's name, I'm so sorry. Yes, Sandy Hausman, who I've known for years, but can't remember names anymore. So Sandy Hausman basically helped us out, and it quickly went national, and the pledges started coming in. It'd be to thousands. I mean, it was crazy, and it would go up every day. We could see them, so this was pretty exciting, and to me, it was a positive thing. So I was happy to have this as something we could offer to people. And there were a couple of things that I guess I wanted to mention about it. One is, if you're going to do something like that, get a longtime meditator person to be with you, because she was very inspirational to me. And it occurred to me when I was thinking about tonight that one of the things we offered, which I hadn't really thought about, was we gave a vehicle. It wasn't really us, but it was a vehicle for people to do something. Everybody wanted to do something, but they didn't know what to do. And a lot of people didn't want to go downtown, or they just didn't know what to do. But this was an option that anybody could do. They could do it by themselves. We weren't going to chase them down about their pledge. It was an honor thing. You do it. So people made the choice. They chose the charity they wanted the money to go to. They wrote the check. We didn't touch it. We didn't get any credit. It wasn't about that. And I think that really was extremely helpful to people. We had so many people say thank you. Thanks for doing something that we could do. So I think that was valuable. And I think the idea of looking, when if I have a practice I can speak of, which is pretty minor, but it involves trying to go to things that are lighter rather than darker, and more open rather than closed, and more helpful rather than not, and less about sides or taking positions that are anti or othering. So this was one way we made that kind of work, and I think it was pretty exciting that we pulled it off. And there were thousands and thousands of dollars raised by charities, and they got these checks. They didn't know where they came from. These checks for $5, $15, $100 showed up at these charities, and they didn't really know where they were coming from. So at the end, which was really pretty terrific. So I did want to talk about redirecting anger as a real possibility going forward, redirecting any kind of negative energy that we're faced with. How can we turn it? I think it's a practice I want to continue and keep trying to remember when I'm faced with things like that. And I think we tapped people's goodwill, which was there. 99.9% of the people want to be good. They want to be helpful. So this was a simple way to do it, and for me it was really pretty wonderful. So,
And we both agreed that it would not have happened without one another.
right.
You know, that we really did kind of goad each other on and support each other. Do you want to tell them how much money went to those agencies? Do you remember?
Well, if we hadn't have shut it down the day of, it would have been millions. But we actually don't know, I don't think.
Well,
That's whole-
we know officially that it was $67,000.
Right.
And we don't know exactly because I know Mary Coleman at City of Promise told me how much money she had received, and I don't remember how much it was, but I do remember that what the number that she told me was substantially higher than what had been pledged.
Right.
So anyway, you know, and we kind of wanted to end with that sense of partnership, and all of us, you know, of goading each other on, supporting each other, really inquiring together, you know. What hatred never ceases by hatred, by love alone is hatred healed. What is, and as Susan started us out, you know, an appropriate response, what is mine to do? And I just love the diversity. I love that we each came up with something that was very intimate, very personal, and different. We have a few moments for questions. Do you have questions for these wonderful beings? Anybody, or comments, or? And we do want to bow to Julie in particular also. Julie, raise your hand, please. Because Julie was there in the basement of the Methodist Church that day, literally receiving wounded bodies who were coming in off the streets and helping. So. Any questions for folks?
I just wanted to relate my weird experience that day. I could not find the Clergy Collective. I tried putting out feelers for people. I drove downtown. Someone said they were at the McGuffey Center. I parked my car. People were being beat up all around me. Police weren't doing anything. I asked a state trooper where the Clergy Collective was. He said McIntyre Park. You should know I was wearing full Buddhist regalia. I had a gold shirt on, my robes. I went to McIntyre Park. I was not aware. I was sitting in the headquarters of the white supremacists. I got out of my car with my prayer wheel, thinking, well, some Buddhists burn themselves to make a statement, and I'll probably get my head kicked in. And I'm saying Om Mani Padme Hung, spinning my prayer wheel, and people are coming up to me, giving me high fives and shaking my hands. I didn't realize what was going on at the time when someone said, "What chapter are you from?" And I'm thinking, what? And then I realized that a Grand Wizard wears maroon and gold. And what I had intended to do backfired on me, maybe. So that was my day.
Maybe your energy in that place was exactly what was needed. Oh, bless you. We're really glad you didn't get your head beaten in. Thank you. And we'll learn later what chapter you're from. Other comments or questions for our team here? Anybody? Or question? Yeah, Nancy Elizabeth.
My comment is I'm so grateful to IMCC because I had no idea what I could do that day. And when I learned I could go downtown and meditate, I could go with a friend's meeting and meditate, I could go with IMCC and meditate, I thought, okay, I can do that. I was scared. I remember walking out my front door and wondering if I'd come back. And I told my kids where I was going and what I was doing, and I was really grateful. And then I felt like a coward when I left, but I stayed long enough to see what was going on and have an impact on me. And if IMCC hadn't done this, I wouldn't have had anything part.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment, Nancy Elizabeth, because there's another quote. Here's a quote from Wendy Palmer, who is an Aikido, she has died, an Aikido master. She said, to be able to go forward and act at a manageable rate, we need to move in increments that will not put our nervous system on overload. And the problem is that sometimes when we really act to take care of our nervous systems, we can have an idea that it should be otherwise. So thank you. That was a really valuable comment, because I know other people might share that. You know, the challenge really, and that's partly what I love about all these stories, is that you hear everyone going through that process and deciding, what is mine to do? What is my body? What is my mind? What is my heart able to do? Even as there is a deep inquiry and a deep care. And activism can take an amazing number of forms. So, thank you. So I hope that you have forgiven that thought of being a coward. We do what we can when we can. I think that's one of the challenges, actually, when we think about engaged Buddhism or engaged spiritual practice, is that it kind of pops up like a cauliflower, like there's one way to do it. You know, a little idea. There's just one way to do this, and I don't want to do it that way, and so therefore I won't do anything. No. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, in considering the diversity of beautiful ways that people showed up, just to acknowledge the ways that people showed up to folks. It was a traumatic event, whatever, however you showed up that day. But also, many people showed up to support people who were traumatized, and that was really vital. There was another layer of showing up, and some of it happened around people's kitchen tables, and some of it happened on therapists' couches, and it looked all sorts of ways. But I just feel very grateful to the people who showed up for the people who showed up.
There's refuge in the Sangha. There's refuge in our support and nourishment for one another, which includes our capacity to be with suffering and includes just the suffering of all beings everywhere, including not maybe, but including those guys with the torches and the machine guns. Okay? We do what we can. All right. I think, thank you. Deep bow to each of you. I loved listening to your stories again, and I am so proud to be part of your little team. Thank you. Okay, they'll be here. They'll answer questions if you have them. Okay, so blessings, everybody.